Hello, this is Pretty Guardian, and you are watching another episode of Mobile Gaming Mondays, where we take a look at all different mobile games. I rank them, review them, we talk about them, and break them down. Today, we are talking about Tales of Crestoria. Tales of Crestoria came out in July of 2020, and this was one that I actually had in my pre-register, sign up, definitely let me know when this game comes out list, because I'm a huge fan of the Tales of games. I love them. So any opportunity for me to see my girl Velvet kicking some ass again is definitely one that I'm going to take them up on. Another Eden did a crossover event with Velvet and some of the other Tales characters, and I was super excited for that one, and I was super excited for this game. For the most part, kind of the gameplay loop is you go on these little missions, and there's a little bit of story done in kind of a visual novel sort of style. And then there's combat. And it's that typical, you have your heroes, you get to select what attacks they do, or you can just autoplay it. It's kind of that typical Summoner Wars style mobile gameplay. For this type of game, I actually feel like it kind of works though, because it is reminiscent of JRPG turn-based combat. Where the gameplay loop really falls flat for me though is in the story. It has kind of this really interesting premise where we're in this fantasy world, and basically if you do any sort of wrongdoing, you get labeled as a transgressor, and they're able to summon these magical, adjudicators to come down and smite you where you stand. And in a way, it reminds me of Tales of Berseria, where in Tales of Berseria, you had that logic versus reason aspect that was happening. And if you take logic to its extremes, you actually end up entering this really dark place. And so tying that back into Tales of Crestoria here, if you commit a crime, it would seem reasonable, oh, you should be punished. But then that also kind of raises the questions of who decides what a crime is? Who decides who gets punished? Where are these adjudicators coming from? There's a lot of questions in there, and those really never seem to get answered. I'm about 8 chapters into the game now. I log in and kind of do a few daily activities and run a few missions most days, but the story is just so slow paced. The premise is interesting, but then it'll spend an entire chapter or 10 levels or so doing really nothing with it. And so even after all the time I played in the game, they've kind of exposed some of the plot holes in there. Not necessarily plot holes, but kind of issues with the system that exists within the world, but we still haven't seen anything kind of deeper on it. So for me, I'm definitely giving the gameplay a 4 out of 5. I do like the idea of having the story, having the levels, and then they have all kinds of different side activities for you, as far as there are raids where you can hunt down these big monsters and get loot from that. There is the PvP element. There are also side quests and events and things like that you can participate in. So there's a good amount of stuff to do in the game. So I'm inclined to give the gameplay 4 out of 5 with just kind of that minus of a point, because the plot is really lacking. And so then when I look at the story, I am going to give the story a 3 out of 5 because it has that interesting premise. Not only does it never really go anywhere within the story, but because of how the content is kind of staggered out, you don't see a full resolution of the game within the game itself. So there's no real ending at this point. You're just kind of playing and seeing what happens. The music in the game, for the most part, is really unremarkable. When I think about Another Eden, there were several tracks that stood out to me as being really good. Whereas in this game, there's no tracks that stand out to me as being really good. After you get through the main page, there is this other like jaunty tune that they play as on kind of the home screen. And it's like really upbeat. There's like a guitar sound to it, but I don't really love the sound of it. Like to me, it borders on like casino music or elevator music or something. I feel like it would be really good in the cash shop. Like if you open up the cash shop and that music started playing, but on the home screen, it doesn't really fit thematically with the rest of the game. And for me, it's just like really repetitive. And I'm like, ugh, every time I hear it now, like it almost makes me sick kind of. And I know that that might just be my opinion, but I'm also looking at the Tales of franchise as a whole, and they had so much good music from the games that they could have pulled from. Music might be copywritten in a way that they can't just use those tracks, but also this is a Tales of game. So it's natural to compare, even though it's a mobile title, it's natural to compare it to mainline titles. So for that reason, I'm giving the music a 3 out of 5. It isn't bad, but it's really not good either. For the art style of the game, I am gonna give that one a 4 out of 5. You have all of the Tales of characters that you can use to fill out your roster and your team. And the characters, for the most part, look really good. They play really good. It's a lot of fun to see, like, if you have any favorites, it's really fun to see them in the game. I know for me that Velvet is kind of like the main reason that I'm playing it. And I played a lot of other Tales of games, so seeing like Lloyd and some of the other characters pop up in the storyline or using them to fill out my team has been really fun. I like the main characters that they've introduced as new characters in Tales of Crestoria. I think they look really good. I think they add a lot of personality to the game. I'm going to give them a 4 out of 5. And the reason I'm subtracting that 1 point is because there are kind of 2 different art styles that I'm seeing present in the game. There is the more animated, cartoony, typical Tales of anime style that you're seeing in there in like the visual novel sort of aspects of the game and in like the face chats and stuff. And then in the combat and a little bit on the home screen in some different areas, you're seeing these more 3D CG style character models. And those ones kind of look a little bit funny to me. It feels like they were just in this really awkward in-between phase and trying to decide like, okay, do we go more cartoony and lean into like the cell shaded graphics and stuff? Or do we go more of like a 3D realistic sort of look? I don't know. There was just a lot of like clashing art styles there. So overall, I think it's good, but I am going to give it a 4 out of 5. When if they had kind of refined that a little bit, I could have seen this going possibly even a 5 out of 5. Looking at the cash shop in the game, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. I haven't spent a single penny on this game, and I feel like I'm able to clear all of the story content pretty easily. You do have to do a little bit of grinding and kind of paying attention to like your character's level. And then also you get these little badges that assign to your character and you have to kind of manage the level of those. I think it's kind of like in place of an equipment system. It reminds me in a way of like materia from Final Fantasy or something like that. I don't think it's out of place, but the fact that it's not straight up like pay to win, I think is important, even in one of these free-to-play mobile games. The pricing of things in the cash shop seems very similar to the pricing that I saw in Another Eden. So for example, $23.99 will get you 2,500 gleam stones. That's the premium currency in this game, which would give you a 10 character pull from one of the banners, which is the same as what I spent in Another Eden. I can't say for sure because I haven't actually put any money into this game, but I can't imagine that you're going to get as good of a pull from that as you would in Another Eden. All that being said, I am still going to give it a 4 out of 5, kind of for the same reason that I gave Another Eden a 4 out of 5. I just don't think that this gacha mechanic should be the only like source of income for these games. I feel like they should give me some cosmetics or like a monthly subscription, or there should just be another way for me to be rewarded while giving them my money, if that makes any sense at all. And that brings us to our final score for this game. So music, we got a 3 out of 5, gameplay 4 out of 5, art style 4 out of 5, story 3 out of 5, Cash Shop 4 out of 5, and that brings us to a total of 72%. This game gets a C-, which I think is actually about fair for it. So it is definitely, to me, a lesser game when you compare it to something like Another Eden, because Another Eden almost stands up as like a full-on game title. Whereas this one is very clearly a mobile game, and it's definitely playable. In fact, if you like Tales of games and you're okay with kind of a slower paced game and waiting for content to come out and kind of just logging in every now and then and seeing where the game goes, it's still a pretty solid game. So I think a 72%, a C-, is about right where it lands. I think with this game, one of the things that made it hard to rate higher in my mind is the fact that this isn't the first Tales of game that we've seen on the mobile platform. Back in 2017, they had Tales of Raise, and that was actually a pretty decent game in and of itself. So the fact that we're seeing a second one in such a short period of time makes me feel like it should really have improved on that format in some sort of way, and I'm just not sure that it does. But it still manages to be a pretty good game. So that puts Another Eden at number 1, Tales of Crestoria at number 2, and next week we're gonna be checking out Night Chronicles, something like that. You'll see when we get there. But I want to say thank you so much for watching. Do the YouTube-y things, like, comment, subscribe. And, if you're subscribed, make sure you have your notifications on so you can keep seeing what's coming out week to week. I love having you here. And so until next time, this is Pretty Guardian, logging out.